They humiliated me because I was the poor orphan nobody wanted, but what they didn't know was that I was the hidden heir to a fortune bigger than they could imagine. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. My name is Emily Carter, and at 17 I had already learned what loneliness felt like. I lived in a foster home that never felt like mine. The other kids came and went, some got adopted, some ran away, but I stayed. After my parents died in a car crash, I became just another face in the system. At school, I kept to myself. It wasn't because I didn't want friends, but because I was an easy target. My clothes came from thrift stores, whatever I could afford with the allowance the foster family gave me. My shoes were always worn down. My backpack had a broken zipper. I didn't stand out for anything except being the girl with nothing. There were people who seemed to enjoy reminding me of that. Jessica Miller was one of them. She was the girl everyone wanted to be, the kind with perfect hair, expensive clothes, and the kind of smile that never reached her eyes. Wherever she walked, people followed. Her boyfriend, Tyler Brooks, was just like her. He had money, looks, and the confidence of someone who never had to think about where his next meal came from. Together, they made sure I never forgot who I was in their eyes, the poor orphan who didn't belong. It wasn't just words. They found small ways to humiliate me. If I sat alone at lunch, they would walk past and whisper just loud enough for me to hear. If I answered a question in class, Jessica would laugh and say something about how even poor kids could read. Tyler once kicked my chair when I was trying to finish a test, and when I glared at him, he smirked like it was a game. Most of the time I swallowed it. What else could I do? Nobody was going to step in. Teachers pretended not to notice, and classmates didn't want to get on Jessica's bad side. So I kept my head down, counting the days until I could leave. What they didn't know was that I wasn't as powerless as they thought. After my parents died, a lawyer named Mr. Harrison had sat me down. He was the kind of man who spoke slowly, as if every word mattered. He told me my parents had left something behind. Not just memories, but a future. Their investments, their company shares, their savings, all of it had been locked away from me. The catch was, I couldn't touch any of it until my 18th birthday. So I kept my secret close. Let them laugh, let them whisper, let them treat me like dirt. They thought they were crushing me, but really, they were giving me every reason to remember their faces. Because when the time came, they were going to see exactly who Emily Carter really was. The cafeteria was always the hardest part of the day. The noise, the groups of friends sitting together, the laughter that seemed to echo in every corner. All of it reminded me that I didn't belong anywhere. I carried my tray to an empty table in the far corner, where no one else wanted to sit. I didn't mind the silence, but I knew people noticed. It didn't take long before Jessica and her friends spotted me. They never missed a chance. As I walked past, one of them whispered loud enough for everyone around to hear, "Check out those shoes." I kept walking, but I felt their eyes on me. The shoes were old, scuffed at the edges, and I knew they weren't pretty. But they were mine, the only pair I had, and that was enough. Jessica didn't let it end there. She walked by my table with her juice box in hand, acting casual. Then, as if by mistake, she bumped into me and the red liquid spilled across my shirt. "Oops," she said, smiling. "Guess charity cases don't need clean clothes." Her friends laughed, and my face burned hot. I tried to dab at the stain with a napkin, pretending it didn't matter. Tyler was standing behind her, and when I looked up at him, he grinned. "Hey, don't worry, Emily," he said. "Red looks good on you. Really brings out the bargain bin chic." His voice was loud enough that people at nearby tables joined in with the laughter. I wanted to disappear. The cafeteria felt like it was shrinking in on me. Every eye turned to watch me fail at being invisible. I clenched my fists under the table and stayed quiet. Arguing with them would only make things worse. I noticed the teachers at the far end of the room. One of them glanced over but didn't move, didn't say anything. Maybe they thought it was harmless. Maybe they thought this was just how high school worked. To them, it was drama that would pass. To me, it was another wound I had to carry. So I kept my head down, focused on finishing my lunch quickly, and acted like their words slid off me. But inside, every laugh, every insult, every cruel glance was something I held on to. I didn't cry in front of them. I didn't give them that. Instead, I stored it all away. I started paying closer attention to the way they acted when they thought nobody was watching. The way Jessica's smile dropped when she thought no one cared. The way Tyler tried too hard to impress people. I memorized it, detail by detail. They thought I was weak because I stayed quiet, but I was learning. Every moment was a reminder of what they owed me. They didn't know it yet, but the same things they used to humiliate me were the things that were sharpening. I never forgot a face. I never forgot a word. And I knew the day would come when I wouldn't be the one sitting alone. For a long time, I thought Sophie Adams was the only person I could trust. She wasn't like Jessica or Tyler. She didn't have the money or the attitude they carried around. She sat with me sometimes, asked about my day, and even walked home with me once or twice. When everyone else looked through me, Sophie made me feel like I mattered. I held on to that friendship like it was the only safe place I had. One afternoon, I walked into the girls' bathroom between classes. The door was slightly open, and I heard voices inside. I was about to leave quietly when I recognized Sophie's laugh. She was talking to Jessica. My stomach tightened, but I stayed still, hidden just outside. "Emily actually thinks she's going to college," Sophie said, her voice carrying a mocking tone I had never heard from her. "She keeps these old letters from her parents like they mean something. Can you believe that?" Jessica laughed, the kind of sharp laugh that cuts through the air. "Of course she does. That girl lives in a fantasy. I mean, she can barely afford lunch, and she's writing about some big future." Sophie joined in the laughter, louder this time, feeding off Jessica's approval. "Yeah, it's pathetic. She acts like she's holding on to some big secret, but really she's just holding on to scraps of paper. No wonder everyone makes fun of her." Each word hit harder than the last. The letters Sophie was talking about were the most private thing I had. They weren't just pieces of paper. They were the only connection I still had to my parents. I never showed them to anyone, but somehow, Sophie had seen them once when she was in my room. And now she was handing my heart to Jessica as if it was a joke. I pressed my hand against the wall, steadying myself, but my chest felt hollow. My only friend was standing on the other side of the door, laughing about the pieces of me I had never trusted anyone else with. When they left, I waited until the hallway was clear before stepping out. My face felt hot, but not from embarrassment this time. It was something sharper, something heavier. I wasn't just sad. I was done. Walking back to class, everything felt different. The girl who used to believe in friendship, who thought Sophie was different, was gone. I kept my expression blank, but inside I made a promise. I would never give anyone the chance to hurt me like that again. From that moment, I stopped looking at Sophie as a friend. She was just another person who had shown me exactly where she stood. And when the time came, she would regret choosing their laughter over my trust. Mr. Harrison's office didn't look like the kind of place a teenager belonged. The leather chairs, the polished wood desk, the shelves stacked with thick books. Everything felt too serious for me. I sat there with my hands in my lap, waiting for him to finish looking through the papers in front of him. He was a tall man with gray hair, calm eyes, and the kind of voice that carried weight even when he spoke softly. "Emily," he said finally, folding his hands on the desk, "your parents planned carefully for your future. I know the past few years have been hard, but they wanted to make sure you would be taken care of when you came of age." I nodded, unsure what to say. He had told me before that my parents left me something, but the details were always vague. Now he pulled out a folder and slid it across the desk toward me. "This," he said, "will all become yours on your 18th birthday. Accounts, properties, investments, company shares. It has been managed carefully, and it has grown over the years. To be direct, Emily, it is not a small inheritance. You are the sole heir to a fortune." I opened the folder, my eyes running over the numbers I could barely process. They didn't look real. There were more zeros than I had ever seen in my life outside of textbooks. "How much?" I asked quietly, my throat dry. He gave a small smile. "More than you'll ever be able to spend. Your parents' business ventures and investments have grown significantly. You're not just comfortable, Emily. You will be a billionaire." The word didn't even sound real in my head. Billionaire. It was like something that only belonged to people on the news, not to someone who sat alone at lunch every day, wearing shoes with holes in them. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. All the nights I had cried alone, all the times I had been mocked, all the times I had felt small, none of those people knew that one day I would have everything they worshipped. I closed the folder and looked at Mr. Harrison. "No one can know, right?" "Not until you decide," he said. "This is yours to keep private until you're ready." I nodded slowly. For the first time in a long time, I felt something steady inside me. A way out. Not just escape, but control. Walking out of that office, I knew exactly what I had to do. I wouldn't tell anyone. Not Sophie, not the teachers, not anyone at school. They would keep laughing, keep mocking, keep trying to tear me down. And I would let them. Because when the day came, when that fortune was in my hands, the look on their faces would be worth every single insult. The flyers went around school all week. Jessica Miller's party, the biggest one of the year. Everyone was talking about it, planning their outfits, comparing rides. I didn't need to check. I knew my name wasn't on the list. Nobody would invite me. I told myself I didn't care. I stayed quiet when classmates gossiped about the party, pretending not to listen. But the sting came when I overheard Sophie. She was standing in the hallway with two other girls, laughing as she said, "Of course I'm going. Jessica said it was time to hang with real friends, not charity project. You know, I can't babysit Emily forever." Her words hit harder than anything Jessica had ever said. I had trusted Sophie, thought she saw me differently. But there she was, proud to leave me behind, proud to call me nothing more than a project she was done with. By the time the night of the party came, I couldn't sit still. I told myself I just wanted answers. I just wanted to look Sophie in the eye and ask why. So I walked to Jessica's neighborhood. The music from her house spilled into the street, lights flashing through the windows. Cars lined the road. It was everything I imagined, crowded, loud, and glittering with people who never looked my way at school. I slipped inside while no one was paying attention. My heart was beating so hard I thought it might give me away. I moved through the house, past groups of laughing kids, until I spotted Sophie near the kitchen, a red cup in her hand. She was smiling, talking like she belonged there. Before I could reach her, Jessica noticed me. She stood at the top of the stairs, eyes narrowing. "Well, look who it is," she called out. Her voice carried over the music. The orphan snuck into my party. Heads turned. The room went quiet for a moment before the laughter started. My stomach dropped, but I forced myself to keep walking. Jessica came down the stairs, her friends following close behind. She circled me like she owned the floor. "That dress," she said, pointing. "Did you dig it out of a trash bag?" The crowd laughed. I opened my mouth to speak, but before I could, Jessica reached out and yanked at the fabric. The thin seam split down the side with a sharp tear. Gasps filled the room, followed by cruel laughter. I froze, clutching the ripped dress, wishing the ground would open and swallow me whole. Sophie stood nearby, watching, not moving to help. Her eyes met mine for a second before she turned away, pretending not to see. That hurt more than the laughter. I ran. Out the front door, down the street, away from the noise. Tears blurred my vision as I clutched the torn fabric around me. I had never felt so small, so exposed, so powerless. But as I reached the edge of the neighborhood, gasping for air, I wiped my face with the back of my hand. That night, I made a promise to myself. No one, not Jessica, not Sophie, not anyone, would ever laugh at me again. The morning of my 18th birthday came quietly, without candles or balloons. The foster home didn't care much about birthdays, and I didn't expect them to. But this day wasn't like the others. This day was the one I had been waiting for. I met Mr. Harrison downtown, in his office that always smelled faintly of leather and old books. He shook my hand firmly and gave me a small smile. "Happy birthday, Emily. Today, everything your parents left for you becomes yours." He handed me a stack of documents, walking me through each one carefully. Bank accounts that seemed endless, shares in companies I had only heard about on the news, estates in different parts of the country, cars waiting in garages. Numbers that didn't feel real sat printed on those pages, but they were mine now. All of it. I didn't say much. I just signed where he told me, my hand shaking slightly as I wrote my name over and over. By the time we were done, I wasn't the poor girl from the foster home anymore. I was Emily Carter, heir to a fortune that could change everything. The first thing I did was leave the foster home. I didn't look back when I carried my small bag of clothes out the door. A black car was waiting for me, sent by Mr. Harrison, and it drove me straight to the penthouse my parents had left behind. When I stepped inside, I almost couldn't breathe. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city skyline. The furniture was modern and perfect, not secondhand or broken. The air felt fresh, untouched by anyone else. For the first time in years, I felt like I was standing in a place that was mine, truly mine. But I knew money and a home weren't enough. I thought of Jessica's laugh, Tyler's smirk, Sophie's betrayal. Their faces burned into my memory. This wasn't just about surviving anymore. This was about showing them who I really was. I called for help. A stylist came to the penthouse the next day. She brought racks of designer clothes, shoes that gleamed under the lights, and fabrics that felt like nothing I had ever touched before. She measured me, studied me, and within hours I was transformed. The mirror reflected someone I barely recognized, polished, confident, untouchable. The change didn't stop there. I hired people to help manage my schedule, to organize my life. Every step I took was deliberate. I was building a new version of myself, one they would never see coming. At night, I sat in the quiet penthouse and wrote out plans. Who had hurt me, how they had done it, and what they valued most. I wasn't going to lash out blindly. I was going to take them apart piece by piece, the way they had tried to do to me. I was no longer the girl hiding at the corner table in the cafeteria. I was someone they could never laugh at again. And soon, they would see exactly what that meant. The school buzzed with news about a big charity event. Posters were taped to walls, teachers announced it in class, and students whispered about who was behind it. Nobody knew where the money had come from, only that the event was fully paid for. New sports equipment, art supplies, and scholarships for struggling students. What they didn't know was that every cent came from me. I wanted my first move to be quiet, but unforgettable. Not a scream, not a fight, but a whisper that spread faster than anything else. I arranged it all through Mr. Harrison, so no one could trace it back to me until I was ready. The night of the event, I arrived at the school gym. The space had been transformed with string lights, tables covered in white cloth, and a stage at the front. Students, parents, and teachers filled the room. I stepped inside wearing a long black dress that hugged me perfectly, my hair styled, jewelry sparkling under the lights. For a moment, the noise in the room seemed to pause as heads turned toward me. Jessica was standing with her friends near the stage. Her eyes swept over me, and I saw the way her mouth tightened before she forced a laugh. "Oh my God," she said loudly. "Where'd Emily get that dress? Did she rob a boutique on her way here?" Her friends laughed, the same old routine, but I caught the flicker of unease in her eyes. Tyler leaned closer to her. "Or maybe she rented it just for tonight. You know she can't afford that." I didn't respond. I just smiled slightly and walked past them as if I hadn't heard a word. That silence cut deeper than any comeback could. The principal took the stage after a few minutes, tapping the microphone to get everyone's attention. "Thank you all for joining us tonight. We're here to celebrate a generous donation that has made this possible. I'd like to introduce our major donor, without whom none of this would be happening, Emily Carter." Gasps filled the room. All at once, every eye turned back to me. The same girl they had called a nobody was standing there as the reason the entire event existed. Jessica's smile froze. Tyler blinked, confused, like he couldn't process what he had just heard. Sophie, standing a few feet away, looked down at the floor. I walked calmly toward the stage, the sound of applause filling my ears. When the principal handed me the microphone, I kept my words simple. I thanked everyone for coming, talked about how important it was to support students, and then stepped back. I didn't mention the bullies, didn't single anyone out. That wasn't the point, not yet. As I left the stage, Jessica tried to meet my eye, but I acted like I barely recognized, like she was just another face in the crowd. That hurt her more than anything I could have said. And deep down, I smiled. This was only the beginning. The day after the charity event, Sophie found me in the hallway. She walked up quickly, her smile wide but shaky, like she wasn't sure how I would respond. "Emily," she said, grabbing my arm lightly. "Hey, I just wanted to say you looked amazing last night. I knew you had it in you. And about before, you know I was just joking, right? I never meant to hurt you." Her voice was sweet, almost desperate. She looked around as if making sure others could see us talking, like being seen with me suddenly mattered. For a moment, I just stared at her. This was the same girl who had laughed with Jessica about my parents' letters, the same girl who had bragged about leaving me behind. I pulled my arm away slowly. "You weren't joking, Sophie. You said exactly what you meant." My voice was calm, almost too calm. "And I don't forget things like that." Her smile faltered. She tried to laugh it off, but I turned and walked down the hall without another word. The silence between us said more than anything else could. But Sophie wasn't done. A few days later, she tried to get her old power back. In the middle of lunch, she stood by a table with a group of girls and said loudly, "You know, Emily's acting like she's always been this glamorous. But let's not forget who she really is. She begged me for help with homework, begged me for food sometime. She's nothing without people like us." The laughter around her was thin, for people weren't as quick to join in as they used to be. I stood up from my table and walked over, my heart steady. I had been waiting for this. "Sophie," I said clearly, loud enough for everyone to hear, "do you really want me to remind people what you've been saying about them?" She froze. "What are you talking about?" I pulled out my phone and scrolled through messages. Screenshots. Sophie had sent me plenty over the years, complaining about others to me in private. How Jessica was spoiled, how Tyler was arrogant, how even her closest friends were useless. I had saved them all. One by one, I read a few aloud. Faces around us shifted, shock, anger, betrayal. The same girls Sophie had tried to impress were glaring at her now. Whispers spread through the cafeteria like wildfire. Sophie's face went pale. She tried to deny it, but the proof was in my hand. The crowd wasn't laughing at me anymore. They were looking at her. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't gloat. I just slipped my phone back into my pocket and said, "I don't need to make you look bad, Sophie. You did that yourself." Then I turned and walked away, leaving her standing there alone. By the end of the week, Sophie was sitting by herself at lunch. The same girl who once turned her back on me now had no one to sit with, no one to call her friend. She had become what I once was, invisible. Through Mr. Harrison, I learned something Jessica had worked hard to keep quiet. Her family's money was disappearing fast. Investments gone wrong, debts piling up, her parents trying to maintain the same lifestyle even as the ground crumbled beneath them. To everyone else, she still looked like the girl who had everything. But I knew the truth, and I kept it tucked away, waiting. The chance came at a local fundraiser held in the city. It was the kind of event where people wore suits and gowns, where names carried weight, and appearances mattered more than anything. I arrived in a sleek dress that drew eyes the moment I stepped through the doors. This was my world now, not Jessica's. Halfway through the evening, I felt a tap on my arm. I turned, and there she was, smiling too brightly. "Emily," she said, her voice sugar-coated. "You look amazing." I've been meaning to catch up with you. We've always been close, haven't we? Close. The word nearly made me laugh, but I kept my face calm. She leaned in, lowering her voice. It's so nice to see someone from school doing well. Maybe we could spend more time together, you know? I think people would love to see us as friends. The room was buzzing, full of donors and guests, but her words cut through like a bad note in music. I let the silence stretch, then smiled sweetly. You know, Jessica, I said, loud enough for the nearby crowd to hear, I might have something for you. I'm always looking for reliable help around the penthouse. How would you feel about working as my maid? Gasps and laughter rippled around us. Jessica's smile collapsed. Her face flushed deep red as people whispered, some covering their mouths to hide their grins. She stammered, That's not funny. But I wasn't laughing. I simply tilted my head and said, I thought you liked helping people who have less. Or is it only fun when you're the one looking down? She froze, unable to answer. The people around her turned away, already whispering about how quickly her mask had slipped. Later that night, Tyler found me by the balcony. He wore the same cocky grin I remembered, though now it looked desperate. Emily, he said smoothly, I always knew you were different. You've really grown into yourself. Maybe we should hang out sometime, just us. I looked him straight in the eye. Do you remember the cafeteria? When you laughed at me for being an orphan, my voice carried further than I intended, and nearby guests turned to listen. You thought it was hilarious then. Still think so now. His grin faltered. The guests didn't laugh this time. They stared at him with disgust. Tyler muttered something under his breath and walked away quickly, but the damage was done. Everyone had heard. That night, Jessica and Tyler's reputations shattered. The queen and king of the school, stripped of their crowns, left standing in the same shame they once forced onto me. Taking control of my parents' company wasn't easy, but it was the most important step I could make. The board had been waiting for me, unsure of what kind of leader a teenage girl could be. I sat at the head of the table, papers spread before me, and spoke with a calm confidence that surprised even me. By the end of the meeting, there was no doubt. The company was mine, and I was ready to carry the name my parents had built. But I didn't want all that power just for myself. I remembered the nights in the foster home, the loneliness, the hunger, the feeling of being invisible. I knew there were other kids living that same story. So I set up a scholarship fund for orphans, giving them the chance to go to college, to dream bigger than their circumstance. It wasn't charity, it was justice. A way to turn pain into something useful. Not long after, the school that had once ignored me reached out. Graduation was coming, and they wanted me to be the guest speaker. The same principal who had looked the other way while I was mocked now called me an inspiration. I agreed, not for them, but for myself. The gym was filled with students in caps and gowns, families cheering from the bleachers. I stood at the podium, looking out at the faces I had once passed in crowded hallways. Jessica and Tyler were there, sitting stiffly in their rows. Sophie too, her eyes downcast. They didn't need me to name them, they knew who they were. I took a breath and began. I didn't talk about money or power. I talked about what it meant to be underestimated, to be betrayed by people you trusted, to be humiliated when you already had nothing left. I spoke about dignity, about finding strength in silence, and about turning every cruel word into fuel. My voice carried across the room, steady and sharp, but never angry. I didn't mention my bullies, but every sentence made them shift uncomfortably in their seats. The audience clapped at the right moments, parents nodding as if I was describing something universal. But the ones who had laughed at me before squirmed in silence, knowing the weight of my words was meant for them. When I finished, the applause filled the room. Teachers who once ignored me shook my hand. Students who had never spoken to me tried to catch my eye. But I didn't stay long. I had said what I needed to say. As I walked out of that gym, I felt lighter than I ever had. Jessica, Tyler, Sophie, they could keep their shame. I didn't need revenge written on their faces anymore. I already had everything they thought I would never touch. Sometimes the people who laugh at you don't realize you're the one holding all the power. And when they finally do, it's already too late.